you for joining us today. I know it's right before lunch and we have a lot of food images, so I hope you leave hungry. We're really excited to be here today to talk to you about the era of camera-first food. And we'll get things kicked off by meeting who's on stage. So to my left is Lior. He is originally from Israel and now calls New York City home. He is a chef, a spice blender, and also has a spice shop, Boîte Biscuits and Spices, in New York City. Has been in the industry a long time and has multiple books and collaborations. So we're very excited to have him here with us today. And to the left of him is Michael. He's originally from Austria and currently lives in New York City as well. After working in the hospitality and finance sector, he joined Advantage Austria, which means he's the Trade Commissioner for Austria in New York City. So he'll be bringing economic perspective to us on our panel today. And then Thomas is also an Austrian. We have a very international panel here. And he is a photographer and cinematographer who's worked with chefs on cookbooks and TV shows, and just last year launched his own film production company. And he's currently based in New York City too. And then my name is Helen Todd. I'm co-founder and CEO of Sociality Squared, which is a social media agency based in New York City. And we just celebrated our 8th birthday, so we've been around longer than Pinterest, Snapchat, what are the other ones? Pinterest, Snapchat, Instagram. So we've been in the digital space a long time. And I'm originally from Tennessee, so you have a Tennessee Israeli and 2 Austrians walk into a South by Southwest panel with 1 parachute. So we're each going to share a little bit about why this topic is personally interesting to us. And for me, I personally identify as an eater on the spectrum of foodie to eater. And I'm always curious about people, what impacts us, what influences us, what's important to us, and what the future holds for us. I work in a digital space in social media marketing, but I believe that you can't replicate in-person connections when people come together, and especially when it's coming around food, around a table, and having conversation. So Lior, you have a funny story.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. When we talked about this, I realized that for many years, I was probably the last person not to own a smartphone. And that wasn't going to work if I wanted to be part of the game. So there was that big moment of me switching from a flip phone without even having a camera and all of a sudden being part of the game, and cannot even think of how I lived without, a camera on my phone, and really changed the whole perspective. It's part of my life, the food, for over 25 years, and really understanding that it's the one thing that I think at least brings everybody to a conversation, to the table, and if I wanted to make some sort of an impact, food was going to be it. It's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. No, for me it's more, I'm the typical Generation X. So when I grew up in the late 80s and started getting interested in food and cooking, there was no Instagram, obviously there wasn't even internet. There were handwritten recipes being passed around, and you had to go to a physical bookstore to get a cookbook. And as a young man at the age of 16, you were always pretending you bought it for your mom, because otherwise you would get some funny looks. And then I got into the hospitality industry during my studies, and I was really getting more interested in the production of food. And during the past 20 years, in my current job, I've been traveling and living in various countries in Africa, Middle East, Europe, and the US. And I was using food photography to kind of document my encounters with different cultures, with different people. And a lot of the things I experienced through food, and I met a lot of people through food.
Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas, photographer, and I'm super excited about this time we're right now in because everybody photographs food, talks about food, knows a lot about food, and that's just two of my passions, you know, photography and food. So it's just, for me, it's super exciting to be in this time right now, and everybody's so engaged with food, and it's just really, really exciting. And I'm so thrilled to tell my stories or stories about food through photography or through film. So that's a really super passion from my point of view. And so it's just a personal thing, and also I'm very happy also do it as a professional and make my living as well in that field. And I'm super happy with sharing ideas and thoughts with people here on the panel, and I love working with chefs. They're just crazy creative minds, and they're always coming up with some interesting things. And food is for me also a universal language. You know, everybody can talk about food, or food is when you go somewhere, even when you don't speak the language, just go in the kitchen, pointing out things, looking in the eyes each other, how proud they are to serve their food from their heritage. And it's just for me every time new experience and super exciting, and very happy to be here today and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And a quick little housekeeping for anyone live tweeting or Instagramming, our hashtag is CameraFood. These are our handles, which the Twitter handles will be on the slides. And, oops, my clicker didn't work. Am I holding it the right way? Click your heels 3 times. Can you just move this slide? There we go. And for those who would like the presentation, we've already uploaded it onto LinkedIn, and it should be tweeted out momentarily, the link as well, so you have access to all of the slides already. And we will be using Slido in just a second to do a poll. So if you have your phone out, which it looks like most of you do, go to sli.do and punch in SXSW, and we'll take a couple, or we'll ask you a couple questions so we know a little bit more about you. And then we'll also, at the end of the presentation, be taking questions both from Slido and from the speaker. So everyone pull up Slido, and we're in Salon AB. And the first question, which we can move to Slido now, is what is your role at your company? We kind of just want to get a feel for who's in the audience so we can cater our questions a little bit. And we'll give you all just a second to answer, and we'll see the results in real time. And it looks like we got a lot of marketing, social media people, a couple executive owners, few creators, and then a few other. We weren't very creative in all of our title choices. Okay, awesome. So a lot of marketing people and a lot of executives and owners and some creators. Okay, cool. So the next question that we want to know is, do you personally take photos of your food? So let us know. I think all the panelists, we take it a lot, but it looks like, okay, most people in the room, I don't know, it's 50, 75%, 20, most people sometimes to almost always take photos. Okay, so we'll go to the next question. Why do you take photos of your food? To add value to your friends and family, to build your personal brand, to extend the table online, to nurture relationships, to share what you love because you love it. Your feed is a platform for food causes or something else. And it looks like the biggest one is to share what you love because you love it. And we've got build some of your personal brands. Okay, great. Well, that is wonderful to hear, and we'll go back to the slides now, the regular slides. Okay. and we'll skip through these questions. Okay, so awesome. Wonderful to get to know you all a little bit better. So we're going to kick things off with what is the state of the plate? What is trending right now? And Thomas, you had said that food is inherently social and we're social. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, food is, as I mentioned before, when you go somewhere and have dinner with somebody, so it's an instant connection with them, and the trend right now is also to be very honest, real, natural, organic. That always comes very often when I work with clients in advertising, where I mostly work with, and with chefs as well. They're so passionate about what's really going on their plate, and they're sticking to the honesty and the realness very deep into, and also adjusting my photography as well to that. Sorry for that. And going using real light, natural light. Don't do any tricks with the food. I really like to just photograph real food. Sometimes you prepare it 4 or 5 times with a chef. With Lior, we have a lot of pleasure working with him, and we really focusing on really creative parts as well. And that's just very exciting for me to work in that part with chefs, especially sharing that passion constantly. It's very nice.
And I think you also said the table served as the first original social network too.
Yeah, of course. You know, the family table, you know, when you sit down with family and friends, big table, and really preparing the food for your family as well, and you sharing all the social things, what's going on, you're telling stories. So that's the first thing, you know, before social media even was available. And now we're sharing this in a bigger audience, of course. But the system is kind of the same. And also when you be very real on social media as well, what I see, then you can engage people very, very strong. And the same speaks to brands, speaks to chefs, speaks to about food. Be real, be honest, and it's a very, very strong thing. And on the kitchen table, that was also in the past, of course, super strong connection always.
Yeah, and Lior, you also had said that it's democratized, like we're all at the club.
I think so. I think what I think is the biggest thing that's happening, and I say that everybody's a fair player. You know, you have a phone, or you have a camera, you have a smartphone. It doesn't matter who you are. For a very long time, who had access to it. Nowadays, all it takes is a phone. It doesn't matter where you are. You are an equal player in the market, whether you're just starting your business, whether you're just you just like to eat, it doesn't matter. And I think it's a great thing at the end of the day, because it forces myself and colleagues to see what's out there. It's a way for me today to evaluate to the point where I sometimes, for new hires, I would just go onto their social media feed to see who they are. You know, the resume became unimportant anymore. I can learn a lot through that for me. So that's, I think, and this idea of democracy, that everybody can say whatever they want, pretty much within reason, through food. And I think the biggest other revelation, and that came from my dear wife, is understanding that not everybody should cook. Some people cannot do it. It doesn't mean that they don't care about food, and it doesn't mean that they cannot express themselves through what they eat. And whether you are a chef, or whether you just like to eat, or just, you know, you find that food is pretty and that's a way of communicating. It's a real, probably talk about it earlier, it's a real social currency, this idea of food photography. Question is, how do you monetize it?
Yeah. And we're also eating with our eyes and camera now. It's really interesting in terms of like the social media platforms. Like every minute, 300 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube, and over 65,000 posts are published to Instagram. It's just a ton of content being published. And for the majority of posts, they see less than 100 people see these posts. And a lot of people are taking photos of their food. In 2016 alone, just as one example, over 73 million people just took photos of their coffee. And that's only one beverage out of the spectrum of food. And brands are getting onto this trend of starting to create food for the camera. Some of it's been organic that the users do. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Starbucks unicorn drink originally was from a user, and then they kind of embraced it as a brand where, if you don't know, it's like layered colors of a Starbucks Frappuccino. And then they introduced the zombie Frappuccino, where people are ordering it more for the photo first and the drink second. And you also see that there's Museum of Ice Cream in New York City, which is literally just different rooms with different settings to take photos for Instagram. It's your studio of creativity. And I recently tried, the Umami burger in New York, which supposedly invented a new flavor. And literally the bun came out branded with a U on top of it. So if you took a photo of it, it was branded with the umami. So it's a really interesting trend in, that we're taking photos with food. That's important. Brands are in on this conversation and also starting to create food with the camera in mind. And there was one study actually that shows if food is photographical and it's worthy enough to take a photo, you are actually going to enjoy it more. There's a ritual to it of taking a photo, a hesitation and appreciation of it, and if it actually makes it look better and you enjoy it more if you take a photograph, which I thought was kind of interesting. And Michael, you have kind of the state of the plate from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, I might want to go a little bit to the macro level, because when we talk about food photography, we take pictures of what's on our plates. And what's on our plates in restaurants or what's on our plates at home, the economy behind it is a $1.4 trillion economy. So, I mean, imagine that. This is a huge part of the American economy. That's roughly the economy of Australia. So every single day we have Australia on our plate. And there's millions of jobs connected to the retail, the food production, the restaurant business, the hospitality business, and those jobs obviously are also affected by the visualization of food, either in a positive or negative way. And what you said about people taking pictures, when you look at millennials, I think 70% of millennials take pictures of the food they eat, and it's only 20% of people who are over 50 years old. What has also changed economically in the past is that we are now in a time when from our disposable income we spend much less on food than in past decades because we had to pay more for food. Food has become cheap. But what has also changed, and this is maybe contrary to what we all believe with social media, that we don't interact anymore, that with the millennials now, this is the generation that's actually spending most in percentage, most of their income as percentage of their disposable income on going out and eating out and engaging with other people in restaurants. So this obviously will have an effect on the restaurant and retail business in the future.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, you are what you eat and photograph. So from a personal standpoint, why do we take photos of food? I mentioned that it's part of a ritual and that it also can actually make us enjoy our food more. But Lior, you had said, that it's also a tool for self-expression. So tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I think, looking at this great photo that Thomas shot of these two fish about 1.5 years ago when we shot our second cookbook together, and doing that, it's it's a real tool of self-expression. You could do it on your own. It doesn't require a lot of explanation. I think that the saying that the image speaks for itself, and hopefully in a good way, or just whatever you feel, you could really. It's such an instantaneous tool to express what happened right now. It's to me, it's sort of writing my journal throughout the day, throughout the year of what I felt and what I ate, because what I ate is probably what I felt like eating and the experience that I've been to and who I was with. So I think it's a fantastic tool to really share what is going on with you and as far as you want to push it through your camera.
Yeah. And then, Thomas, you had said food is inherently nostalgic. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course, everybody has memories about food, and you always remember, when you grow up as a child, especially in the region where you're from, what your grandma made, that kind of dish, and you always have that in your palate. I think that's also, you get trained at that point as well, very much so, and that's deep memories, and that memories can come back when you smell something, when you taste something, when you see something on a different food level. And I think this is a super, super strong level, and that's in the food photography and then for brands. That's a very interesting thing to tackle on and just trigger that memories, and they're so super strong, so deep inside you. And always, when I'm also going back to, I learned so much from chefs. They're always having some food when they grow up. They're always talking about, they're always dreaming about, and all their recipes are influenced about that. I see that with chefs. Every single creativity is influenced almost from their childhood, and that's so strong. And today, with all the when we have our Instagram, when we slide back, we memory. When I see sometimes pictures, exactly know how was the smell at that place, what was behind me, was I'm shaking at the moment, or was I'm sweating, or whatever, and it's so intense, and the memories are so strong connected just with food. Maybe it's just me. I'm just crazy about food, but that's happened to me all the time, and I love that moment. And I think that's also very strong because I see people so engaged on social media with food. I think that's because of that. It's just deep inside everybody, and it's just great and nostalgic. It's everybody loves that, going back.
One thing that we had talked about last night is you mentioned you see a photo and the memory of the smell, but with all of the advances in technology, you still can't have the full experience of eating with VR and AR. So I think that's a really interesting, we are digitalizing and pixelizing our food, but you still need to eat food.
Yeah, right. And I think that's great. I like that aspect, actually. Keep something really, I have to call it very, very, very personal. Put it in your mouth and experience it. So no, Instagram cannot do that for us. A robot cannot do it for us. You can explain something on Instagram. You can make a good picture. You can explain it. You see a sauce running down, create some craving moments. But the last moment is super personal for everybody, and I think that's good to keep it that way. I like that.
And Michael, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say something to VR and AR, because there have been recent developments to make people eat more healthily and healthy food, that you can use VR and AR and pretend basically that you're eating a juicy, big 1,000 calorie steak while you eat tofu. So we might see people in restaurants eating very healthy food, but with glasses, imagining that they're really delving into a juicy steak. This is a tendency that's happening now as well.
Then they're disappointed when they put it in their mouth, right? Because
Yeah.
Depends on the VR.
your memories,
Eating with your eyes. That sounds like Peter Pan.
Yeah. There's also the idea of a real sort of therapy. I'm not qualified to talk about medicine perhaps and therapy, but from speaking and even for myself, there's something very therapeutical about this idea of sharing what just happened in that moment. And so I wouldn't say relief, but a sense that you could touch so many other people and have them part of the story, and occasionally you even get to meet them, which is kind of awkward when you meet somebody in a different country and they ask you about your pasta last night, yet you have never met them in your life before. I keep on thinking about it. What are the implications and how big of it? I don't think I see the real big picture yet.
There was a New York Times study on psychology that came out a couple years ago that really did research onto why people share, like the psychology of sharing. And we kind of planted the question early, where most people in the audience said that they share because they love it and they want to share it. The New York Times study broke down a couple different reasons: to bring valuable, enlightening, and entertaining content into the lives that of the people that they care about. And this could be from food to your kids' sports games, to define themselves as an extension of our personality. I think, Lior, you said that you use this as kind of your visual diary. to grow and nourish their relationships. If we all took a photo together, or it's a connecting where you got asked about the pasta, self-fulfillment we share as a part of giving back, and then to get the word out about causes they believe in. So the plate as a platform, which we'll talk about in a second. But we're going to move into the brand aspect. So why do we share personally, but where does this fit in from a brand perspective? So show me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. And actually, you kind of mentioned this earlier about we're all invited to the club, but maybe you could expand on that more.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I love this idea that, whether you're a really big brand or just a business that's just starting, or whether you're just anybody, there are no more rules to some extent. If you could capture a moment, we're talking about food photography, you're an equal part of the game, and I think that a lot of larger brands or medium brands or whatever are aware of the fact that you have to adapt to these new rules and games, and I'm always blown away by somebody who posts their kids' lunchbox every morning, and it's that same lunchbox, and it's perhaps the same ingredients day in and day out, the year round, with about 500 people who watched it and thought it was nice. And I go back and I was like, what am I, what don't I get about it? Yet I'm part of it because I am watching it and I keep track of it. So it means that they're doing something. They have an impact. While 5 or 6 years ago, they didn't have a saying in it. So if I'm manufacturing, kids' lunch boxes or juices, I think I want to understand what's happening. And I think that's why I like it. And again, as I mentioned earlier, myself and a lot of other colleagues really use these images and photography through food to get a better understanding of potential business partners, new hires, and events and things like that. So, yeah.
And Thomas says, you take photos to help chefs build brands and do a lot of storytelling.
Strongly, and especially working with chefs and brands, creativity is a key. I think you have to be very creative and always looking for the new thing, and always exploring all the different foods and also visual aspects with it. That's the strongest part you can make as a brand, to make it really exciting and creative. Yeah, that's the part. Going back to what you mentioned before, just comes something in my mind, the health aspect about food as well. I think as a smart guy said, the farms will be the new pharmacy with FARM. So I think that's a very, very key when we get back to grow good food and put it in your body. I think that a lot of health issues will be easily solved, and that's a great trend back to that, and that's super exciting. And we have a strong voice as well, and we can choose in the grocery store what we're picking up and what brand we believe as well. I think that's also amazing. Yeah, as a brand, you have to be very careful what you put out, and we have the choice. We trust you, we not trust you, because we have the knowledge, and we can get the knowledge very easy. The commentaries are strong things about that as well, and going back to that.
And Michael, pop in.
No, again, macro level, I'm sorry to say, but nations are brands as well, and we see the tendency that you're using photography and food photography to pull people into countries, to visit countries. There is the pull factor that more and more people are interested in visiting countries because of food. I think 50% of Americans, when they decide on where they want to go on a trip, the food and the culinary aspects are really, really important for the decision making. That's one of the reasons why, for instance, Peru has become one of the interesting travel destinations at the moment. Food plays a big part in that. But on the other hand, you have gastro-diplomacy. It's like push, these countries that are using photography to attract people through food. You might have realized that a couple of decades or years ago, there were Thai restaurants everywhere in the world, and that was actually subsidized by the Thai government. They were using restaurants to make people aware of their food and then bring people into their country. Taiwan is another example. South Korea is another example. Austria, my own country, is another example, through wine and pastry, etc. So this can be used not just to use as a brand, as a company, but as an in-nation branding as well.
And I think that ties into our next topic as the plate as a platform. We'll move on to this, and actually, I think, Thomas, you said this, as the plate, there's a no bullshit zone, which kind of builds on what you were saying a second ago.
Right, yeah, so that really should honor that space as well, I think so, as a brand, as a chef, especially what you put in front of your customers, and of course, as inside the family table, at the kitchen table as well, you want to feed your family with nourishing, very good quality food. So I think that statement gives for me everything about food, just make your thing, just be very honest and true to your vision, very creative, and just stick with that and everything will be better.
And what was that example with Chipotle you said last night? Like, people will call you out if it's like with the transparency.
I saw that on Chipotle, they put out a queso and people totally didn't like it, and then they changed the recipe. It was very quick turnaround, what I saw from the medias. They changed the recipe, and in the end, it didn't work out. Even after changing the recipe, it was not great for the customer. They have a really strong voice in that, and then they took it off the menu or just serve it at the side. And it was, I think, in a 5 or 6 month turnaround. So, wow, super strong.
Yeah, I think definitely it's an amazing platform, but food. I mean, generally speaking, as a platform to deliver a lot of messages. And to Thomas's point, that we had the pleasure of working a lot and shooting a lot of food. And if you've ever been on a food photo shoot, and there could be a lot of people who aren't related to food or to photo, and just start spraying a lot of shining things on the food to make it look good. We personally share this idea that if we cannot eat it right away, there's no point of us shooting it. And I realize, and Thomas was great helping me in that, is that if it's going to taste good, it's probably going to shoot really well, and it's a very genuine, honest message, and that's the way we've worked, and that's the way I work. Even with what I shoot, you're going to get called out on it eventually, if it was, something that's fake or unreal, because I think the transparency is, again, something that's really great. And the plate as a platform of you look at a food photography on social media, you don't necessarily think about it at first, but then where is that ingredient coming from, and where is that country, and what's the message behind it? And it's not only food-wise. I know I might be jumping later on, but it's really nowadays, it's a sort of a political tool of dealing with other issues. And I think one of the examples that I always talk is our dear friend Jose Andres, who's, if it wasn't for him just going, with a little amount of cash to Puerto Rico and started making sandwiches with way too much mayonnaise, bringing up an issue that nobody, wanted to deal with perhaps, and we're not going to get too much in it, but our responsibility today is, as people in the food business, is so much bigger than just, cooking food. We touch so many subjects, and we have to understand that, because what we put out there has so much influence and impact. It's scary to some extent, but it's also amazing that our voices could be heard via our cup of coffee that we posted this morning, and send a message.
Thank you. And Michael, we were talking about using food to tackle bigger social and economic issues. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I would maybe mention three topics. That's health, that's the social issues, maybe food to do good, and that's politics. I mentioned briefly health, that more and more companies are using pictures of food, and consumers are using pictures of food to really find out about the nutritional value, the calories. There's apps where you connect it to your wearable tech. They tell you, should you really eat that food, or what should you order from that menu on that particular day. That has huge implications on health systems and on policy making in healthcare, because the US is one of the countries that uses most of its money as a developed country in healthcare, 20%, but with sometimes very mediocre outcomes. So if people eat more healthily, you could reduce that that percentage by 70%. These expenditures. Another thing is maybe social, that there's more and more tendencies to actually, it's kind of delete to feed, that people are actually deleting posts, deleting Instagram posts, and are part of an association that the more you delete, the more you are also aware that people who take pictures of food have food. And there's a lot of people, there's food insecurity, there's not a lot of people who can take pictures of food, not just abroad, also in the US, because they don't have food, or they don't want to show the food they're eating because it's not healthy and it's very cheap. So that's a new social trend maybe that will impact us as well. And politics, at the end, you might all remember the picture of Trump during the campaign on his plane where he was eating KFC chicken, but with fork and knives. So people were kind of like complaining, he's trying to be one of us, but he doesn't know how to eat KFC. There was another senator who was ordering a kosher food, but ordered a glass of milk with it. So if you want to be, part of a particular culture, try to understand it and not appropriate it. You really should know the game. And a last example, and I mentioned it yesterday in politics, where food can maybe resolve an issue. And sorry, I have to mention Trump again. It's North and South Korea. It's a big issue at the moment, the Korea crisis. But there's a particular dish in North Korea. It's made with cold buckwheat noodles in a beef broth, which is a staple food in North Korea. But it's become the latest trend in South Korea. Restaurants are opening up. Food associations are like food groups are taking pictures. They're sending it back and forth. People are really, really becoming more interested in it. And there's a South Korean who wants to open a restaurant on these buckwheat noodles next to the United Nations in New York, so that North Koreans and South Koreans can negotiate a deal over that broth. So maybe the crisis will not be resolved by Trump, but by a buckwheat noodle.
We've talked about some of the trends, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of see some predictions of, what's the future of consuming food and pixelated food. So, Thomas, would you like to kick us off on your predictions?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend is we are into the from still image to moving images. I think that's the biggest trend, and that's a very good thing because you can tell a story very, very nice with short content, even with longer content, with films, with documentaries, as I mentioned before. And that's the biggest trend I see right now. It's really going into the emotion and real, honest, and organic. That's natural. That's still very much on the plate. Be creative. So that's a strong high quality. It's a theme, whatever it is. High quality. We see Chic Shack made it perfectly. Open up a burger company but holding quality very, very high. How they make it, and everybody loves it because it tastes good, because it's quality. So there's a very, very good example. There's still room out there, to open up huge companies and going to the stock market, even with an idea making a great burger accessible for everybody. So it's out there, and it's a lot of opportunities, and the biggest thing will come for sure.
And from a social media standpoint, I mean, it's just video across platforms, and then vertical video for Instagram. I think one thing, restaurants are beautiful because they're the merging of digital and in-person experiences, but I would also predict that more brands will be doing experiential marketing and combining the offline and online, where you have, people actually coming together in person. I hope this happens more, as much as I predict it will. And then having those photographical moments that are special. And maybe even sometimes when you turn off your phone, where it's really special. And then we went and saw the Giphy presentation yesterday. One interesting trend that came from that is like passive content of maybe we'll just be watching someone knead bread in the background as a very soothing thing, and maybe not as a utility of how to learn how to teach or learn how to knead bread. But I also think there's so many more people posting about food, and it's really an extension of our identity. If Pinterest is kind of like our aspirations of what we want to cook, what we want to purchase, what we want to do. So it's an extension of that. Instagram is like an extension of our visual diary that's curated. So from a brand standpoint, it's how do you fit authentically into the lives of people and their identities. So I think the brands who are authentic, and the one thing that we talk about in our company is the backlash to the highlight reel of like over perfection, and I think that comes through in food of looking more natural and organic too. But Lior, let's
What's
hear
my
your
predictions?
your
Are you
predictions.
ready? Take some notes. Here we go. I think that on any level, when it comes to that, it's going back to basic and stripping off everything, and it doesn't matter if you make a flavored water or high-end 3 Michelin star restaurant food, and it's understanding what it is that you're doing. And I know it sounds silly, but often enough, a lot of people who produce things and brands and whatnot making the same thing for years and years without ever saying, what are we doing? And let's go back and let's come up with a great narrative, a great story, and is our story is the same as what it was 100 or 80 years ago? Do we actually understand? It's great to say that you've been in business for 100 years, but is it still valid today? Are we communicating that story? I always say that I regret I didn't have a grandmother who taught me anything about cooking. They were both miserable cooks, and I invented a sort of story, so I have a great narrative. But understanding your product, and I also, another thing is with all the technology, and we've seen a few panels here about some sophisticated, the future of kitchen and equipment. I think at the end of the day, it's going to make us perfect our techniques and our cooking and the ingredient search and going back to the basic. And if you are trying to shoot a better food photo, by default, you're going to start cooking better, so you're getting to a better result. And I think that's to me, it's very interesting. I find myself often enough and colleagues cooking for perhaps a photo, and I want to make sure it's not burned and it looks good and it's the right thing and all of that. And the last kind of quick thing, it's been happening and it's going to continue. What I kind of refer to as the grandmother factor is ethnic food. It's the search as you start expressing yourself personally, and what Thomas talked about, the notion of home and tradition is digging into your history and bringing that ethnicity and culture influences.
Predictions, I would have two, maybe in the future of retail and the future of restaurants. And the future of retail is about information between consumers and companies. That you will use pictures of labels, so there will be new labels that really explain when you take a picture where the product is coming from, where's the fishing ground that John West is doing this, for instance, how was the fish transported from place A to place B, what is the picture, you will find a picture of the farm where the cow was raised and the name of the cow, so people will be more informed as a consumer. But on the other hand, also the private sector and companies will want to have more big data and data from the consumers. So there are already tendencies that when you take a picture of Heineken is one example, you take a picture of a Heineken beer that you order in a restaurant and you post it, you get certain points, and if you get a bigger amount of points, you can redeem them either for a good cause or for a voucher. But of course the companies then know what is the consumption pattern, who is using their products, under which situations and where. And the future of restaurants, maybe we see, I think, and you probably know it much better, diverse reactions of restaurants. There are restaurants that actually prohibit you from using cell phones. They don't want you to take pictures. They don't want, chefs don't want their food to get cold, or you to climb up on the chair, to have the perfect angle to take a picture, because that doesn't look good in a restaurant of certain, big chefs. But there's other restaurants, and in Tel Aviv, actually, there's one that is doing exactly the opposite. They're preparing particular plates, they have particular lights, they have stands for cameras, so they really encourage you to post and Instagramize your food. So I think these will be two tendencies that
I would go to the second one where I could photograph. And I think this leads into our next, we didn't mention this, that the future, like food will keep us human. And whether it's, coming together around a table and eating, but also the storytelling and learning more about our food. And Thomas, you had a couple of good things, or Lior, but I think, as we go more and more tech, we still have to eat. And I hope it never becomes a pill, but this will keep us human.
No, I think it's what I said about the technology advancing, but at the same time, somebody still has to operate it. And I hope it's not going to replace completely. And I think because of the excitement around food, it forces us in a good way to deal with a lot of human aspects of who we are, what we eat, who are the people that we're hanging out with, where are we going. So that the human factor not only is not going to disappear, I think it's only going to get stronger and stronger with this idea that the food would be that perhaps factor.
Okay, so for the sake of time, because we do want to leave some questions, we do have some tips and takeaways for you too that we'll go through. And I loved how Michael was talking about, taking photos from the farm to where we're going, and that kind of goes with, well, actually, Lior, you said this, know and love your product and stay true to your brand, but it's all part of storytelling too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of these things plus much more is really pausing for a second and understanding what is that you're trying to say. So back before that, it would be a lot of copy and a lot of narrative. Now is what is that perfect shot? And when I say perfect, it could be a little imperfect and messy and dirty if that's the story you're trying to deliver. And I think it forces you to be honest with yourself, is what the hell are you trying to deliver, whether it's just for fun with your family and friends, whether you're a large brand that's trying to sell an item, whether you're trying, we use it a lot in a fun way to just kind of get a poll or a sense of what can work and what cannot work. So that's another great way that we use that.
And I'll go through, I do the technical tips here. When you're creating content for the web, you want to customize and optimize it for each platform. So if you take one photo, don't share it exactly the same way across platforms. Crop it square for Instagram, crop it vertical for Instagram stories, shoot video for Instagram stories, Pinterest, do longer pins. So each platform has its own way how to optimize. And vertical is big now. Be nimble. Platforms are constantly changing, and it, just build in learning and adaptation to be ready to test and experiment. And then Thomas, this is kind of yours. Think visual storytelling. So I'll let you pop in.
Yeah, I think we talked about already about visual storytelling. It's a strong thing you can use for telling your story, your honest story, and really bring out everything what you believe in, what your product is about, and we're getting deep into the roots. And then let's judge the public what they believe and what they don't believe. So it's very strong. Like Leo mentioned, you're testing your product sometimes on social to see how it works out. So it's a great tool.
And then content, community, and conversation are king. Social proof is important. What we mean by this is it's still important to build community. If you're deciding between restaurants and one restaurant has one follower on Instagram or one review on Yelp versus another one that you're considering that has 1,000 followers and 500 reviews that are good, the social proof, you're probably going to go with the social proof. So it's still important. The platforms like Facebook is kind of de-emphasizing fans and going to audiences. But from a consumer level, when you put in like how you're actually deciding, social proof does come into play. And then I think, Thomas, you had these offer the last two. Can you see them? Offer full visual transparency. Or maybe Lior, you said this, the content will have to have the new visual currency by which many people judge and evaluate you.
Yeah, I think to me, transparency personally, it's crucial. My social media it's pretty much my life. I think more people know my kids than they know me as the Spice Brothers, and maybe that's the next brand. that we're going to launch. But they play a role in what I do. I cook for them. They cook with me. It doesn't matter that they don't eat the food that I cook for them, but that's a whole other conversation. But this is, how decided. I'm not hiding anything. As much as I want to. And the content, as I said earlier, the content that you're posting, it's a sort of a currency. It's a social currency. It's who you are, what you do, how much you value. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. It's just, I think, the state of things.
Yeah. Great. So we have 10 minutes left, and we would love to hear your question.
I'm intrigued by your thoughts on storytelling, because what strikes me is often when we talk about farmer or grower, we treat it as a noun that doesn't have a face or a personality. And when we do show the grower, we tend to show it in quite a sanitized way, so they're walking through an absolutely orchard and they're happy because the crop is harvested. What we fail to show is the moment when the hailstorm came through and devastated half the fruit 2 weeks before harvest. Would the ability to tell the real and raw story of the realities of growing vegetables, would that be something that would enhance our relationship with consumers for them to kind of see the raw, vulnerable side of farming, because they're some of the most entrepreneurial risk takers we have in this world? And I just don't feel that we express that story maybe as truly as we could answer that.
I have two thoughts. One is we should make food more precious and respect food and the entire process of food, from growing it, who's taking care of it. The tricky thing when you start talking about the disaster is too strong of a word, you have to be really careful. So I grew up in East Tennessee, and November of 2016 had wildfires, which devastated the area. And that's the only thing that the national news got, was that the wildfires. And now the town is having to do positive PR of like, we're open for business, come. And I would imagine the wineries in California, if you're only promoting the devastation, then that could actually impact the tourism, or like, if it's not balanced with the hero arc of like, we've overcome and we're still producing and there's still product to buy, there's still wineries to visit. But if the media, or if it's only presented as the one slice, that could actually negatively impact the tourism and the purchase and the thought process of if it's available. So I think it's important to respect and know this whole thing and have transparency, but the knowledge that it's still open for business is really important, because you still want to support these farmers financially, and that's by their products, But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, I agree with that. I think that, the transparency is great. You just have to, pick the right angles. I don't know about necessarily the disasters or not, but more about adding value to the product, and how do you tell your consumer that this tomato costs, $6.99 a pound, because there are people who devote their lives to growing that perfect tomato, and this is their lifestyle, and this is how much effort and money goes into it. And I think that's the great thing of showing that, and the climate challenges, more from a challenging perspective, not necessarily from a negative perspective. And I think that adds value. It also adds a great story. We went to a really nice, great panel yesterday about food waste. That's a whole other shift. But when you see that, you understand the value. You start respecting things. You're going to think twice before buying it, and buying just what you need. And you're going to make sure that you're using everything from that tomato before it goes to perhaps not even waste, because you really value it. And I think that's another angle to showing it.
When you see, I think when you show a farmer, for me, they're really heroes. It's insane, they just have to deal with the sun every day and with everything what's around. And I think when you show them a little bit the struggle, every hero, think about movies, think about great movies, every hero struggles at one point, and the outcome is very strong because of the struggle and the learning through the struggle. I think it's great to tackle it on, to show it. You get the hands dirty and blah blah blah. The disaster thing, okay, but still, I think you can, when you make it smart, you can include that as well. Showing as a positive thing, the outcome is positive at the end. You know, you have to go through hard times and learn on the hard way sometimes. That's also, I think, very strong in storytelling, makes a difference.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. I just wanted to know, in your experience, if you can give us any case studies of food photography or video that resonated most on social media, engaged most, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the top posts that we did for one of our clients, it was that comes to mind offhand. We did a campaign with Muna Cottage Cheese is one of our clients. They want to be the Chobani of the cottage cheese category. And we did a content-first campaign of lunch boxes, and it was for kind of like a mommy and me concept of reinventing. Is this still on? Reinventing the same lunch for a kid as for a mom to help efficiencies, and people just loved it because I think it was a great insight into the audience. It was beautiful photography and it fit into their lives. So that content for that particular campaign was some of the top content of 2017 for that particular client.
Not a real case study. I wish I had somebody to do case studies about what I do. But just from engagement, one of the best things I've ever, or better interaction that I had with the people who choose to follow what I do was me in Italy. I have a tough life sometimes, and I went to look for a particular herb for one of our blends, and on the way there I decided to stop at the little farm that makes mozzarella cheese. And that was the best thing I've ever done, I think, of getting people interested in that herb, is me posting something about the mozzarella farm, which at first doesn't make sense at all. But that was kind of their trigger. So to the storytelling, it's how I got there, not necessarily the actual herb, because I don't think anybody saw the actual herb, but that kind of brought them to do it. So it's something about that. And to your question, my visit to a pepper grower last year, we've never mentioned especially that particular pepper, but people got so excited about who's that guy, who's in the field and growing it and that kind of brought them. So I think that the end result doesn't necessarily matter, is how you get there, I think.
All right, we have a lot of questions, but only 2 minutes. I think there's one from Trey. What do you think resonates more on social digital channels? Food with the wow factor, like black ice cream, or trendy whole foods, natural brown sugars, paleo dishes? To me, some of it's stunt marketing, and it's totally cool to tap into food trends as long as they're authentic to your brand. Because people will, like, if we're Muna Cottage Cheese and we're showing black ice cream because that's popular, that doesn't support the brand. Like, whatever the trends are, you have to know your brand, love your brand, and build content around your brand. Maybe we have a question for one more. Let's see, the top rated one. When it comes to content, how do you see the power of user-generated content versus stock photography shift for brands? We love user-generated content. I think you always have to get permission and give credit to the user. And stock photography, we try to use it as minimal as possible and work with original content. So the more original content for your brand, the better. But you guys?
I think that, from personal experience, so what I see again is if I was that brand, if I was, I would find that person and bring him on board, and it's like, I want to talk to you. I want to work with you. I want to bring you on board to utilize and benefit all of that versus using a stock.
I think just very simple, stock photography you cannot be your own thing, it cannot be fit 100% to your brand or your vision. You have to create it to make that happen. So stock photography is really not the best choice. And from my point of view, it's an easy choice, a very accessible choice, but it's hard to find the really picture language you really like to put out as a brand. User-generated is much better because users are engaged to your product, and that's much, much stronger right there, even if it's not perfect.
Well, we'll try to maybe answer the questions in a follow-up blog post. But thank you all for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful lunch after this. I know I'm hungry. And please do rate us in the app, because that's important for the organizers. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. And we'll be
Thank you very much.